All right, we are back with episode 8 of the Feel for the Game podcast. This is the Mississippi State Miracle. So, we're going to go ahead and get into our week 2 recap of the upsets that happened this weekend. Let's go ahead and start with the Mississippi State Miracle, like I mentioned. Mississippi State outduels Arizona State in Starkville 24-20 in a crazy upset game. Lots happened in this game. It was up and down. State looked like they were going to run away with it in the first quarter. Had a major comeback attempt from Arizona State late in the third and fourth quarters where they pounded the run game and chewed a lot of clock, making this game a 3 point Arizona State lead going into the fourth quarter. And as you can imagine, in typical Mississippi State upset fashion, which is almost never, they win on a walk-off touchdown with 30 seconds left. So you can imagine how loud it got in there with the cowbells. We were there, got to witness this one. Landon, what are your thoughts and impressions after getting to see this game as a State fan?
There's been a few moments as a state fan that have been like as great as that one. Because usually for us it ends in disappointment. Like I was fully like beginning to prepare myself to accept the loss here, just with how bad it was going. Because I've been there so many times as a state fan. This past basketball season felt like that. We had a bunch of games of basketball that we just sold down the stretch, and this just felt like that in football, which we've done that in football a ton too. But we've been so bad recently that we haven't even had the chance to sell a game because we would just get blown out. There was nothing to sell because we never had anything. But I thought that we were probably going to lose, but just the big plays that we were able to get throughout the game, we got one more of them when we needed it, and that was the difference.
Yeah, that at that point when Arizona State went down to the goal line and it looked like they were about to go up a touchdown and y'all got the stop for the field goal, typically most teams would see that as an opportunity to still go win the game or tie it and go to OT. I saw State fans getting up and leaving, and I looked at you and I was like, what's happening? Why are these fans leaving? Like, there's still 2 minutes left. State's used all their timeouts and they have a chance to go win this game. And I think you kind of just told me by the way that you were looking at me like this is typically how things go with Mississippi State. The fans just think that the game's over.
I thought they were going to punch it in. I mean, they drove down the field 95 yards for 10 minutes, and I thought that was going to be it.
Yeah, I mean that's you got to give credit to Mississippi State. Like most teams would just kind of roll over and let them score just to hope they had a chance to still win it. But all credit to Jeff Lebby to coaching his team into getting a stop here. The defense was impeccable. The defensive line played really well in this game compared to how I thought they would play. That was probably the most crucial moment in the whole game that they stood out to me against a solid rushing offense in Arizona State, keeping them out of the end zone and forcing them to a field goal from like the 2 or 3 yard line. I mean, you just can't ask for better than that. And in that tight of a situation, after you were winning 17-0 and starting to know you're going to go down and have to win this game, being behind after you've been ahead the whole game. It was just a very well coached come from behind win there in the last seconds from Jeff Lebby. That touchdown to Brennan Thompson was a piece of art. I couldn't have drawn that up any better. And I'm sure a lot of people who are State fans and Arizona State fans saw the corner blitzing defender trip and miss a possible pressure on the quarterback. And a lot of Arizona State fans were looking at that play and saying, "Oh, well, he gets home. That's probably a sack or an incompletion at best." And I'm thinking to myself, without Blake Shapen played, I don't see why he still couldn't have gotten a throw off. It probably wouldn't have been as precise as you want, but I think he finds a way to get enough air on that and lead that pass because the whole middle of the field was wide open. I mean, Brennan Thompson was on the inside of that duo split far right. He shakes that guy on the double move. He's got over the top leverage. There's nobody inside because of the safety blitz. And so you got that whole side of the field open. Brennan Thompson's one of the fastest players on the field. That's a no brainer throw. They drew that up. That needed to be a touchdown or a huge play for a field goal. And that ended up being just that. So, I mean, that was probably one of the loudest moments I've ever seen a stadium get to. I really wish State had like the decibel readers up on the Jumbotron for this game. There's no telling how loud this game got. I've been to LSU twice against my will, and the fans alone at LSU are the loudest that I've seen, but that's because they come in so many numbers and they're so unhinged. In Mississippi State, they had 2/3 of the fans, but with the cowbells, the actual range of the noise was so much higher than anywhere I had ever been. It was just absolutely unbelievable. So I couldn't have drawn up a more exciting game after how we predicted this game to go at the beginning of the season, or at least how I predicted it to go. I figured it would be close, but I've been picking Mississippi State since week 0 and before, and very happy that the Bulldogs proved me right here, even as an Ole Miss fan. I just smelled this one coming. I don't know what it was in the preseason that really gave me this feel, but chalk this up as a win in the category of feel for the game W's on this podcast. There'll be many more, I'm sure, but this will probably be one of the best ones. So, yeah, I think that um, Arizona State's offense making the resurgence in the third quarter is what made this game as interesting as it was. Because Mississippi State was dominating this game from the get go. And I felt like as soon as Arizona State closed the half out with that field goal,
That was
what
where it flipped.
yeah, it flipped
That's where
right
everything
there.
flipped.
And I feel like the run game was really the sole reason behind that. Sam Levitt couldn't throw. There was nothing there. He was getting under pressure the whole game. Shout out to Mississippi State's defensive line. It was super well coached, and they prepared very well for that. And they made Sam Levitt and that offense hand the ball off to win the game. And that's what they did. They ran for another 250 yards after that and ended up taking the lead. They just pounded the rock over and over again, chewing clock and not giving the ball to this Mississippi State offense that had multiple deep touchdowns in this game. I think that's the only reason this game ended up coming down to where it did. It's great coaching from Arizona State. And referencing the last play, if that blitz does get home and affects the passer, we're looking at a different headline. And fortunately for Mississippi State, that's not the case. They really needed this big signature win for Jeff Levy, but absolutely exciting game. Probably a top 5 game that I've ever been to. I've been to some really exciting Ole Miss games, but this is definitely up there for one of the best games I've ever been to.
Did you go look at time of possession in that game afterwards?
I didn't. Do you have the numbers on that?
38-22 in favor of Arizona State.
Yeah, it felt like the whole second half Arizona State had the ball.
And they probably had it 22 minutes in the second half. Like,
Yeah, that just says a lot about this team. I actually still have Arizona State winning a lot of football games after this.
you have them not losing again.
I do. I still don't know how I feel about that because they can't throw the ball right now, but they don't play another SEC defense this year, so I think that gives them a good chance for some good offensive outings. They continue to run the ball well. They can beat anybody. I think if they ran the ball like that from the beginning of the game, unfortunately for Mississippi State, I think they would have won. But yeah, I really like the coaching from Kenny Dillingham in this game. He handled the end of the game very well in the press conference. I thought he was still very confident in his team and what their abilities are. So I still have decently high hopes for Arizona State. I did have them making the playoff, even though I had them losing this game. So there's still a chance for that prediction to come true. I won't rely on that to be the case because the Big 12 is so insane. But just an awesome game. I mean, I think Mississippi State fans will look back on this win for a long time. So yeah, do you have any final thoughts on that game, Landon? You want to share?
Well, I was just going to say for Arizona State, they get Baylor in 2 weeks, so that'll be a good chance for the passing game to improve.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we're gonna see if their pass defense improves by the time they play Baylor because Sawyer Roberts and that Baylor offense have the best passing attack in the nation right now. Maybe outside of Western Kentucky, I would say they probably have one of the top yards per game offenses passing the ball so far. Sawyer Robertson has been incredible. So that about wraps up the Mississippi State Miracle. We spent a good amount of time on that, but incredible game. And love the atmosphere. Starkville was a lot of fun. First time ever going to a game there. Definitely want to go back for another big one soon. USF versus Florida, 18-16. In the swamp, USF goes in and catches a W here. Not a lot of people saw this one coming, including me and Landon. I would say you were probably more on base with this pick than I was, Landon. I had Florida kind of pulling away second half and just kind of ending this game. Probably a two. I didn't put a number on it. Probably a 2 to 3 score game, 14-17 range. I just felt like Florida was going to be the better talented team. They proved to not prove me right in that area. Florida just could not get anything going offensively. I felt like DJ Lagway underperformed in this game and was trying to play hero ball, and it just did not turn out well for him. Byron Brown didn't even necessarily play his best game. They had a couple of very sporadic big plays that ended up probably costing Florida the game, given that it was an 18-16 final. That penalty at the very end of the game, then sportsmanlike conduct from Florida, spitting on the opposing player, extending that drive for USF. I mean, that was crucial. You just can't make mistakes like that and expect not to lose games that are close. So that's really one that they're gonna have to look back on. I feel like that's gonna be kind of like the Marco Wilson shoe throw. Like they should have beat LSU a while back, and they had a DB throw LSU's tight end shoe after a play, and they probably would have gotten the stop and at least had a chance to win the game. And LSU ends up getting the drive extended with that penalty and kicking a field goal to win it. And that has been a nightmare scenario game that just keeps getting brought up for Florida over the past couple years. I feel like this is similar. It's funny we saw Jalen Carter spit on Dak Prescott in the same weekend. I don't know what's going on with these defensive tackles, but they're on one. So that game was interesting. As far as our feel for the games are concerned, this is one of the only ones we've really missed on.
We weren't too far off either. Like how most of the game went is how we anticipated. We just figured Florida would be the better team in the end, and they weren't.
Yeah, placing a lot of faith in this Florida team early after a very momentum-filled comeback to the end of last season probably wasn't the smartest idea. I just feel like there was so much talent on this team and promise for them to lose at home to a USF team that is very good. I have them ranked in the top 15 right now. I think I have them at 15. And I have a really hard time justifying Florida's level of play with the talent that they have. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I think that this is probably an outlier for them as far as overall offensive output. I think we might even see better next week against LSU. Even though they have an incredible defense and it's in Death Valley at night, I just have a hard time seeing this Florida offense not rebounding from this over the season. There's a lot of learning points they can take from this game and possibly mistakes that they can not repeat. But overall, it was a great game. Huge upset for USF and Byron Brown's squad. I mean, I wish we had gotten to watch more of this game. We didn't get to watch too much of it, but after watching some of the highlights and replays of it, I mean, I like how physical this USF team is. I think they've got a real chance to make a run. Miami is really the only huge roadblock staying in their way right now. They're going to have some other tough games in conference,
They
but
go at Memphis as their toughest conference game.
if that's your toughest conference game with how you played up to this point, I think a win at Miami and you're looking at probably going 12-0 into the conference championship. And I think regardless, if this team beats Miami and loses maybe one upset game against a Memphis or like Navy, I think they still make the playoffs. I mean, they've already got better wins than most of the teams in the entire country do. Like I would say FSU, LSU, and maybe Ohio State have the biggest wins so far outside of USF's wins. USF has had back-to-back statement wins in a tough environment in Gainesville against a good, more talented squad, and I guess they overrated Boise State, but still a really good football squad that made it to the college football playoff last year. They've got two statement wins to start the season in 2 weeks. I have a hard time seeing them doing that 3 weeks in a row against a really good top five ranked Miami team. But if they do pull that off, we're gonna be having a completely different conversation about this team next week. So very interesting game that transpired. Did not expect that outcome, but very much wanting to ride the Bulls hype train this season. I'm going to try not to too much because I feel like there's a lot of other group of five teams that can make a push, especially since I picked UNLV to make the playoffs. I'm rooting for them to prove me right, but I love USF. Had them in my dynasty that we're currently playing. I think I just finished like 11-3, so didn't do too shabby with them. But I was not able to beat Florida in the swamp, so that was definitely a little bit of a difference there. Fun dynasty though. All right, moving on. This is the game we got right. West Virginia versus Ohio, 17-10. Parker Navarro takes a W home here. I felt bad about this game going into it. I didn't feel like West Virginia really had the firepower, much less the defensive performance necessary to beat a team that, with the quarterback run at their hands, can be very lethal. They proved in this game that their defense was just good enough to stifle West Virginia from really scoring too many points and keeping them in this game. So I think we had a pretty solid feel on this. We predicted a Ohio win, both of us did, and that's what happened. Parker Navarro played a solid game. Didn't score too many points. Didn't play out of their minds offensively, but I think he had a pretty good game.
He actually threw 3 interceptions. I did not know that before.
Yeah, I think that when you play a Power Four team, as a Group of Five team, you're most likely going to, in an effort to go down and win the game and be aggressive. You're going to see games like this. I think despite the 3 interceptions, I thought Parker Navarro played pretty decent and gave them a chance to win.
He ran for 87 yards, which is good as a quarterback.
Yeah, anytime a quarterback can go over 50 yards rushing, they made a tremendous impact on the game. You need to watch the film on games like this to see the real story, but I think you can look at numbers like that and you can clearly say, okay, this guy was a game breaker at quarterback. Because anytime a quarterback rushes for that many yards and is not a triple option quarterback, there's a really good chance that those are a lot of unscripted runs or scripted runs that went really well. And really well scripted quarterback runs are really hard to stop. So really liked what I saw from the Bobcats. Huge win. They play Ohio State next week, so not picking them to take an upset there, unfortunately. I think the line's at -30 for Ohio State right now, so
Yeah.
wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot stick. But another upset. After getting upset in week one, Army beats Kansas State 24-21. I personally didn't even really realize this game was going on after they lost to Tarleton. I had just kind of forgotten about Army. But after being so low on Kansas State, I think if I had seen this game, I would have definitely felt the upset potential there. But Army goes in and beats Kansas State. Getting an onside kick in the fourth quarter was huge for this team. They were able to pull off a huge win after a really rough loss against Tarleton FCS squad. I don't like what I'm seeing from Kansas State. They don't look good.
No, not at all.
Yeah, Avery Johnson, I was pretty low on him and this Kansas State team from the beginning of the season. So far, I did not predict them losing to Army and almost losing to North Dakota, but they are a game-winning drive against North Dakota away from being 0-3. So I don't like what I'm seeing from this team. I haven't seen a Kansas State team this bad in a long time. So miss Bob Snyder. I think they're really wishing he was there right now to pull him out of this hole. But yeah, I don't like what I'm seeing offensively from this team. Defensively, it looks like any team can really put a good offensive outing against them. I don't know how they're going to play in conference play moving forward.
Well, they have two winnable games coming up. They play Arizona, which we don't really know a ton about Arizona yet, and then they host UCF. But after that, you go to Baylor, you host TCU, you go to Kansas, you host Texas Tech, at Oklahoma State. That's probably a win, but at Utah, and then host Colorado. Like, there's only a couple of those you can confidently say they'd be favored in.
Yeah, with how they've been playing, the only team I think that is an absolute must win and probably should win is Oklahoma State.
Yeah,
They're
after
terrible.
last week, yes,
We're going to get to that game here in a moment. That was a complete splattering of Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy from Oregon. Just complete murder on television. But I really don't feel good about the squad moving forward. I had them going 7-5, and that was low for most people going into the season. I think they probably hit the under on that.
I have a
I
nine
don't
and
like this team's chances of making a 7+ win season.
yeah, I had them at 9-3. That's crashing and burning, most likely.
Yeah, and that's part of preseason rankings and expectations that we create. 9 out of 10 times they don't really come together. So speaking of that, real quick, I want to address the podcast outline moving forward. We really didn't get an opportunity to do this. We've kind of been going headstrong, trying to crank out episodes, just given our work schedules and traveling for college football games. We don't have a lot of time to record, but when we do get that time, we want to make sure we're hitting on content that's relevant. So we haven't really addressed this, but in the pilot episode, I talked a lot about how we were going to break down a ton of games, pretty much every single Power Four game that had an impact on the season. And we were going to do that all preseason and release those games and get in depth on a lot of them. We didn't end up doing that. We felt like there was a lot more content that we could kind of push out in this podcast that's more relevant, and preseason expectations usually don't really end up coming to fruition very often. Despite this being the Field for the Game podcast, you do have to watch football and see things kind of come to fruition throughout the season. And now that we're in football, we're going into week 3 this week. There's no point in really moving back to that kind of content. So just wanted to clarify that. I'm sure that's not really something that needed to be too clarified, just considering we're 8 episodes in and we haven't touched that. Just wanted to point that out. And then our last week 2 recap for upset games was UNLV against UCLA. This team in UCLA just lost to Utah by multiple touchdowns last week. It was not close. I think Utah put up one of the best offensive performances as far as efficiency is concerned that I've seen in a long time. They were like 14 for 16 on third down. Complete splattering there. Goes to UNLV, and I think they were favored by like 2.5 or 3 in this game. Not a lot of people picked them though, so it still qualifies as an upset, but we had UNLV winning this game in a close shootout. It ended up being 30-23 game, so they won by 7, proving us right. But wasn't the shootout that we were all expecting? I think UNLV was up like 23-3 at some point.
23 to nothing.
Yeah, they were putting the throttling on UCLA at this point, and Nico had absolutely no answer. He looked unpoised. He looked inaccurate. UNLV's pass rush was getting to him, and this is a terrible UNLV defense. I say terrible. They can improve on the season and get better, but with their current output against Idaho State in week one, I just did not like what I saw. I mean, they were just so slow, and there were so many gaps. They were not gap sound on the defensive line. They allowed a ton of rushing yards, and the secondary was super spotty. They would come up with big PBUs and interceptions, but then they'd get dotted up for 400 yards. So this defense was just really porous, and I didn't really have a lot of faith in them, but still 23-0 was pretty impressive. Maybe UCLA is just that bad. I don't know. Not liking my predictions for UCLA. I think I had them going 8-4 or something like that. Not liking my predictions on Nico either. I kind of figured he would kind of be the reins behind this team. If he played good football, I felt like the talent would kind of play up to his level. It doesn't look like they have much talent on this team. Not a lot of depth, nothing in the trenches, nothing out wide. I just don't think this team has it. And I think it's going to be a long season for UCLA. So we did hit on that one. I think we went 3 for 5 on these upsets. We didn't pick Army Kansas State. I'm sure we probably would have picked Kansas State
I
for
would
the
have went with
rebound
Kansas
game.
State close, but
Yeah, with how Army lost to Tarleton, I would have had a tough time picking that game. But shout out to Army getting a rebound win there. That was nice. So not too bad for the upset picks. Moving on to the best of the rest from the slate in week two, Ole Miss versus Kentucky, also 30-23. I predicted a blowout here from Ole Miss, and due to a very slow first half start and a lot of interceptions from Austin Simmons, this team did not really get the chance to ever put this game away. I felt like after probably the end of the first quarter, going into the halfway through the second quarter, that time period in the game, Ole Miss started to kind of take things back. They got the reins of the offense a little bit more headed towards downfield. They were starting to push downfield on Kentucky. We ended up closing this game out running the ball a lot. Austin Simmons suffered an injury. I don't think it was very serious, but we kept him out of the game, and we just kept running the ball in Kentucky. We wore them down, and eventually it came down to Kentucky kicking a field goal to make it a one-score game with like 10 seconds left. So in reality, Ole Miss probably would have ended up covering this if Mark Stoops doesn't kick the last second field goal. So that sucks for all the bettors out there. I know Lane Kiffin already apologized for that. I thought that was funny that he's thinking about stuff like that. Not that it's really important to him, but he's always got jokes. Didn't like what I saw early in this game from Ole Miss. Kentucky's the same team they always are. It doesn't matter who they've got at quarterback or running back or defensive line. They're going to try to slow the game down, be physical, hit you in the mouth, and run those gap scheme run plays until you just can't handle it anymore and you just start giving up big plays. And thankfully, Ole Miss kind of never really hit that breaking point. They played a lot of bend don't break defense in this game. They gave up some tough plays, but they never really let things get too bad, and they never let any huge runs kind of exploit this defense for the rest of the game. They held gap sound for the most part, and were able to close out with a solid defensive performance, in my opinion. I think you had this game being pretty close, though.
I did have it being close just because of how it's been over recent years and the way Kentucky plays football.
Yeah, I mean, with Zach Calzada at the helm of any football team, I feel like there's always a chance for a bad offensive output. Considering it was Kentucky, I was just banking on this team to do nothing offensively. After how they played against
And they
Toledo,
really didn't, though. Y'all gifted them the two interceptions that helped them out a lot, but other than that, they really didn't manufacture much.
yeah, and to Kentucky's credit, a well-coached football team is going to capitalize on turnovers. We turned the ball over in opposing territory in the first quarter twice. I'm pretty sure they got 10 points out of that.
Yeah, they went up 10-0 on that, I'm pretty sure.
So, given that, I think you got to give Kentucky a little credit. They started off this game really well, better than Mark Stoops could have asked for. As a 8.5 point dog in this game, they go up 10 in the first quarter. You gotta like their chances, but they just weren't able to manage the game. A Kentucky team usually wants to in a situation like this. You never want to be behind to Kentucky. It's just a bad spot to be in. I know as a state fan, you've seen a lot of games where state's just gotten a little bit behind. It just feels like you just can't get the ball back. All they do is just play efficient 4 yard average a game, average a play football, where they're just getting handed off, run little play action, dump offs and screens, and 9 minutes later they're kicking a field goal on your 5 yard line. That's just what it feels like playing Kentucky. But overall, not too terrible of a performance from Ole Miss. I feel like they played a C-D+ game here, and were still able to win almost by double digits. So on the road game, SEC win. Ole Miss plays Arkansas next week. We will be traveling to this game. Very excited. We're going to break that down at the end of the podcast, but looking forward to that matchup. Next, we've got Baylor versus SMU. This ended up being a crazy game. I think SMU got out to an early lead. Baylor comes back and ties it late, down from several scores to go into OT. We both had Baylor winning this game in a get right game, but it was going to be close. I think both of us had it. Very close game. This was a lot closer than I thought it was going to be. Um, Double overtime, 48-45 win for the Baylor Bears. Another masterclass from Sawyer Robertson. Kevin Jennings played a great game too, but I think the better quarterback definitely won this matchup.
Yeah, I mean the way Robertson's played these first two games has been just incredible. He's had to play this way for them to be competitive in these games because of how bad their defense has been and their run game has not been there. And he's been able to step up. And for them not to be 0-2 right now, it's just a testament to how good of a quarterback he's been.
Yeah, I think you got to give all the credit to this offense. They were missing their top wide receiver in this game, who played really well against Auburn in week one, and they were still able to drop 48 points on this SMU defense, who was pretty solid last year and made the playoff. I know they're declining defense this year, but I wouldn't say it's by too much. I just thought that Baylor's passing offense was just, they looked unstoppable. I mean, they looked unstoppable against Auburn, but they only scored 24 points because they barely had the ball and they couldn't run the ball when it mattered. I think they got stopped on 4th and 1 several times in that week one game against Auburn. They did in this game against SMU as well, which hurt them. They probably could have scored 60 points on SMU if they hadn't gotten stopped so many times on those 4th and shorts. The run game outside of those short yardage plays was better when it wasn't expected. When they're passing the ball the way Baylor's passing the ball, the defense is going to start dropping back, and those safeties are going to get really high, which gives the running back a chance to get into the second level. So I didn't see too much of that from Baylor, but they were giving the running backs chances to break the game open, and they scored a lot of points in this game. Really fun game. I think we'll look back at the end of the season and look at this as one of the most exciting games we watched all season. So huge win for Baylor, big get right game, very close win. Baylor is going to be looking to improve in conference play moving forward after a tough start against Auburn. I like this team. I think their defense is just going to have to get better though. Dave Aranda being a defensive coach, I just can't imagine why your defense is the worst part of your team, considering this is probably one of the most talented offenses Baylor's had since 2014-15 era when they were going to the Sugar Bowl and Cotton Bowl every year. So I just feel like this is Baylor's chance to really make a statement and win a lot of huge conference games and possibly make a run at the Big 12 championship this year. We'll see how that goes for them, but I thought that was an incredible performance from them offensively. Moving on to Vanderbilt versus Virginia Tech. This final was 44-20. I had this game pretty much dead on the money. I felt like Vanderbilt was going to start off kind of slow. I didn't have them starting off behind, but I had them starting off slow in this game. And then over time, this run game from Vanderbilt, the option style running game, was going to wear down Virginia Tech. I didn't feel like South Carolina had much success running the ball because outside of the quarterback run, I didn't think their run game was very effective. So Vanderbilt with that option style keeps you guessing and on your feet all the time. There's so many motions and so much movement behind the line that's distracting that when this team gets rolling offensively, they're just so hard to stop. They're so efficient. They don't turn the ball over very often. And Diego Pavia and Cedric Alexander played a great game and played consistently. Had one bad interception, but outside of that, they really put the foot on the pedal in the fourth quarter and just completely gassed Virginia Tech. I think you had this game being in Virginia Tech's favor. I don't remember what your score prediction was, but I know you picked them to win. How do you feel about that outcome?
Well, I felt pretty good at halftime. They were up 20-10, and then second half they just absolutely collapsed. It was 34-0 Vandy in the second half. They outgained them by 300 yards. I think it's about time Virginia Tech gets rid of Brett Pryce. What I think.
Yeah, I just maybe they need to change up offensively once Kyron Drones leaves this year and they can possibly look elsewhere at quarterback. He doesn't win big games and this was a must-win game. Not that Vanderbilt's the best team in the country, but they're a really good squad. A win here would have set them right going into conference play, but starting off 0-2, you schedule two SEC games to open the season. You just gotta win one. I mean, if you think your team has a chance at being at least a bowl eligible team, you got to win one. And they dropped both of these games in double digit losses. You have one at home, you have one neutral site. You didn't even play an away game here. I don't like what I'm seeing from Brent Pry's team, and I really do think we see a coaching change by the end of this season as well. But solid performance from Vanderbilt. They go play at South Carolina this coming weekend. I think South Carolina's favored by 6.5. Line moving down every day. This game's going to be really interesting. We will definitely have no question of who the better team is that played Virginia Tech in the first 2 weeks after this matchup. So moving on, we had Missouri versus Kansas. So we both picked Missouri to win this game. I think the real big stat lines to point out here was Missouri's rushing offense. They had two 100-yard rushers in this game, and Bo Pribula played a huge part on the ground in this game, closing it out. After starting off down 21-6, Kansas just statistically was behind, even though they had the lead. It felt like Missouri was the better football team and should have been winning from the get go. They just capitalized early on some Missouri mistakes and got a quick lead. Didn't last long. Jalen Daniels did not play his best game. I thought he played all right, but Kansas's defense is just not really there. They're not a good enough squad defensively to win 9+ games this year. Missouri might be a little underrated. I might have had them a little underrated. I think I had them going like 5-7 or six and
I had him
six.
at 6 wins, and I don't really like that anymore after this one.
I don't either. We still haven't seen them play good defense yet, though. So I don't want to overrate this team too quickly. We saw a similar scenario last year where they played Boston College at home and won on a walk-off field goal, and everybody had them pretty high up. I think they were number 6. We talked about that last podcast. They were overhyped. They finished 10-3 though, so this team could finish with 9 or 10 wins and still not be an elite team. I think the schedule's favorable. Everything to me hinged on Bo Pribula's play. They've got great wide receivers. I feel like Kevin Coleman's going to be a top 3 receiver in the SEC by the end of the season, most likely, if not top 5 in that area. He's incredible. Produced really well at Mississippi State last year. I just feel like this team has so many weapons offensively. If they can find good defensive play down the stretch against good offenses in the SEC, they can win some games they're not supposed to win. I just don't love Missouri yet. I'm going to need to see a little bit more from Bo Pribula against top tier defenses. Because if he plays like this against good defenses, Missouri could be a college football playoff contender. I'm not willing to go there yet, but I think their success is going to hinge specifically on his play moving forward. Next, we've got Illinois versus Duke. We both had Illinois winning this game close. A lot of different outcomes here that I saw being the case, but Illinois winning by 26 points was not really on my scorecard. So I liked what I saw from Luke Altmaier in the squad.
5 Duke turnovers, 0 Illinois turnovers. That was the difference.
Yeah.
Duke actually outgained them in this game. They just gave them the football so many times that it just got out of hand.
Yeah, and it's funny. I guess I didn't really dive too deep into this game. I saw Darian Mensah had some really good throws, but I didn't realize they turned the ball over 5 times. I knew it was a lot. I didn't realize it was that
I
much.
think 4 of them were fumbles or something. Like,
Yeah, I mean, if you're fumbling the ball 4 times in a huge ranked matchup, you're not going to win. If the team's as good as they're ranked at, you're not supposed to win those games. And Illinois capitalized on those turnovers and scored touchdowns. And towards the end of the game, they really put this on ice and just kept capitalizing on Duke mistakes and didn't let up. It was close there for a while, and then Illinois just put the foot on the gas, kind of like Vanderbilt did against Virginia Tech. I think these teams were similarly profiled, but Illinois definitely showed to have more talent defensively, and I think that little bit of disparity got exposed in the end of the games. Illinois had more depth and just kept the foot on the gas and cranked up the touchdowns on them. So I liked what I saw from Darian Mensah. He's played better than I thought he would this season so far, despite Duke not being really as good as most fans anticipated them being. I think he's going to be good. We need to give him some time to kind of get gelled with this offense and these receivers. They've got weapons. Their offensive line kind of sold in pass protection a lot in this game, which really hurt them. But moving forward, I like this Duke squad. If they can keep the ball secure, they can win a couple games. I know you mentioned when we were talking about Darian Mintz in the preseason that he had a lot of issues with fumbles, and I think that's starting to show a little bit. Ball security is just going to be one of those things that you've got to improve on over time. In practice, that's valuable reps that you get every week that you should be getting better at stuff like that. So I expect to see them get better in that area over time, but I don't think it'll transpire over a week or two. But that game was fun. I'm excited to see what Illinois does moving forward. They play Ohio State very soon. Probably will be a big noon kickoff. Probably the most big noon kickoff game I've ever seen. Illinois is going to be a top 10 team going into number 1 Ohio State, most likely. Should be really interesting.
they get Indiana before that, so that'll be kind of be an elimination game for the playoffs. I would feel like.
I would imagine so. I'm low on Indiana right now. If they win that game, though, they'll probably jump into the rankings for me pretty easily. And then we'll be talking about Indiana again, like we were last year. But I feel like this Illinois team's better, and they'll probably take that one. So That's a good one to look forward to before the Ohio State game for sure. Big Big Ten championship game aspirations for these teams. Those games will be a huge determiner on who shows up there. OU versus Michigan, 24-13 final. This game was, I don't think it was as close as it looked. I feel like Oklahoma was just the better team. I think a couple of sloppy drives offensively from Oklahoma, a couple of underthrown passes from John Mateer kept this game from probably being a little bit wider of a gap than it should have been score wise. Michigan couldn't get anything going on offense. Bryce Underwood, sub 50% completion percentage. I thought he played
Very sub
okay.
50. I think it was like in the 30s or
Was he
something.
like 9 for 24?
Yeah, I think it was not.
So I don't know what the math is on that. It's probably 35 to 40%. So not good. I expected something in that nature. I felt like Oklahoma was going to win this game pretty, not easily, but handily, probably still a little bit of an overstatement. I felt like they had this game in the bag. Um, Michigan's offense just didn't look good against New Mexico in week one, and their defense looked pretty average for a Michigan defense that's usually really good. Lost a lot of talent on the D line last year. So I think Oklahoma, despite this being not as good of a Michigan team as it usually would be, this is a good win for them. It's a statement win moving forward in the SEC conference play. They've got a lot of momentum, and I think John Mateer is right up there at the top of the Heisman race right now. So I'm looking forward to watching this team play really stiff competition. Um, I think this will probably be the best Oklahoma team we've seen, um, in I don't know how long. I don't think they're going to be a national championship team, but I think this team all around doesn't have very many holes. So I really like this team overall. Looking forward to seeing them play against Ole Miss later in the season. I think that game probably have more implications on the SEC championship and the playoffs than a lot of people think. Whether it's an elimination game for one team or both, I think it's going to be really important. That game will be in Norman. Very excited about that game. I think that's the first time Ole Miss has played in Norman, maybe ever. So should be a historical game for both teams. Lastly, on the best of the rest, we had Clemson versus Troy. This game was disgusting. I did not like this game for Clemson. They were down 16-3 going into the half. They had to turn it around and score 24 unanswered points to win this game. I just don't like what I saw. I still have Clemson ranked in the low 20s right now, but to be honest with you, I think that really the only reason I still have them ranked is because they were able to rattle off enough points when they really had to make a statement and say, all right, we're better than this team. We're supposed to win. And then they won. That's really the only reason I still have them even in the rankings. And they've got talent. I think Georgia Tech's going to win this week, and they're going to go right out of my rankings just like that. So I'm not just preserving them in the rankings so that I can bump Georgia Tech up more. I think that Clemson still has some juice in the tank to be a solid team. I don't think they're elite. I think we saw that in week one and week two. I think this game sheds a lot of light on LSU, a Clemson game in week one. LSU has not looked really good offensively in the first 2 weeks. They've looked okay, but they haven't looked great. So something to keep an eye on, as I'm known to be a very biased fan towards this fan base in LSU. I'm not preying on their downfall here, but I am going to point out more often than most people when I think they might be overrated. I think they might be overrated right now. I think the AP poll has them at 3 right now. Is that right?
3 or 4, I
Yeah.
think.
Uh, I think that's too high. I feel like Oregon would beat LSU by at least 2 touchdowns right now. I think if they played neutral site, I mean, Oregon's looked like one of the most dominant teams in college football in the last 2 seasons right now. They look incredible. We're about to get to that game. But I think this Clemson Troy game tells us a lot about Clemson and LSU moving forward, especially after LSU had a terrible offensive outing against Louisiana Tech last week. Louisiana Tech's not a good football team. They played well enough at Tiger Stadium at night to keep it a
2 possession game.
yes, a 16-point game. Yeah, I mean, I know LSU fans aren't happy about that, and they're probably more upset than I am. I'm not freaking out about it. I think this Florida game this weekend is going to be a great game, but I think that tells you a lot about where this offense is at. The defense is staying consistent, though. That's the one staple for this team right now that they usually don't have. So, different team, different season, different expectations. We'll see how they perform this weekend. Getting into the last game, yeah, like I was saying, Oregon versus Oklahoma State. I think I might have skipped this one. Wanted to get to this one real quick. 69-3 final in Eugene. Mike Gundy and Oklahoma State get absolutely splattered on live television. This was a murder scene. This was like when you play Clue and you start the game and you're trying to figure out who got murdered. Well, there was no doubt who got murdered on this football field. It was Mike Gundy and Oklahoma State. They could get nothing done on offense. Their defense could not stop Oregon at all. I think Oregon had maybe 8 scoring drives in the first half, something ridiculous. And they were up by at least 45 to 50 points in the first half. It was a complete shelling. Oklahoma State never had a chance. When I saw the line at this game being 28.5 to start, I just felt like Oregon was going to hit the over on that easily. And I did not see Oklahoma State playing this bad. I haven't seen Oklahoma State ever be this bad. Um, I, I'm surprised that there are not more people calling for Mike Gundy to be fired after this. I know Oregon's really good, and I'm very high on this team. Um, but man, Oklahoma State looked terrible. I don't see any bright spots for this team right now. Oregon offensively just was so good, so dominant. Dante Moore had a great game. It's 2 games in a row he's played way above the caliber I thought he would be able to play to start the season. I think he's going to be a Heisman contender if he keeps this level of play up. He's been one of the most consistent quarterbacks in college football. This offense has been the most consistent offense in college football so far. Against weak competition, yes, but overall, they've been almost unstoppable. I like what I'm seeing from the receivers. Kenyon Sadiq at tight end has been incredible for them. He's just a mismatch nightmare with the size and speed combo and consistency catching the ball in the backfield. He can even run it a little bit. You just don't see that from tight ends in college football anymore. He's very versatile, Swiss Army knife kind of player. And then Decorian Moore at wide receiver, true freshman 5 star, highly touted guy. He looks incredible. I'm very excited to see what he can do this season. I love this team. I think they're going to make a real run. I had them losing in like the first or second round of the playoffs. I think this team's going to make a deeper run than that. I really feel good about this team moving forward. I bumped them up to number 2 in my top 25. I just feel like the only team that really can stake claim to be a better team right now overall is Ohio State just because they have a better win. I mean, Oregon may not have played anybody, but they've clearly been the most dominant team. So just wanted to get on that game real quick. I know it's not a huge playoff impact game. Oklahoma State was never going to be in contention for any sort of talks in postseason, but they're definitely not going to make a bowl game now. I just don't see this team having a route to even 4 wins. But moving on from that game, we're going to get into what next week's pod is going to look like a little bit. So we did lessons from last fall introduction. That was part 1 in episode 7 that we did. So we'll finish up part 2 next week. I feel like there's a lot of monumental games that are going to be played, just like last year in week 3, that shaped the landscape for college football moving forward into the postseason. So that's why we're moving it over. We're not going to do it right now. I feel like a lot of the games this week were great, but a lot of people said it was a sleeper slate. Ended up being really fun. Just not a lot of playoff implications were played in week 2. So we're going to save that for next week. Week 3 big game overviews. We're going to go ahead and get into Colorado at Houston. That's our first game we're going to get into. Colorado has a new quarterback. Ryan Staub has replaced Caden Salter, and Julian Lewis is the starting quarterback at the moment. Did not see this coming. I don't think anybody predicted this.
Nobody saw this coming. I didn't even know that this was a player on the roster because we've just heard so much about Salter and Newman.
Yeah, I might have been a little bit blind to this, specifically including Julian Lewis, because after hearing a lot of the offseason chatter about him getting to play, I figured Caden Salter was the shoe in for the starter. And I said there was no chance we were going to see Julian Lewis play early.
I called him Newman. I meant to say Julian Lewis. I don't know why I called him Newman.
No, it's okay. There's so many different college football quarterbacks, especially when we're talking about 3 that were in contention for the starting job at Colorado right now. I don't know how long this is going to stick. This may just be a fun little narrative that we see. This guy's he's been at Colorado since Dion's been there. He's never really gotten a shot. He gets his shot against Delaware last week when they're playing poorly and plays a great game. I don't know how long that's going to stick. He may end up being their starter long term. We'll see. I'm rooting for him. I love to see underdog stories like this. So I'm really cool if he ends up playing well. I just don't. I don't know how you take a third string quarterback over the 2 guys that you got in the transfer portal in the recruiting class that are supposed to be your guys moving forward. Whether it was Caden Salter finishing the season and leaving, or it was Julian Lewis being your guy for the future. Going ahead and moving on from those guys to go with a third stringer is not necessarily a good look for them. But if it helps the program win, then that's what you got to do. And I think Coach Prime's making a good move here. If Ryan Staub really is the best quarterback on the roster, he should be playing. So overall, Landon, what are your thoughts on this game? Because I feel like Colorado's going to take a win here. I just think they're the better football team.
Yeah, I'm taking Colorado here, but this should be with how these two teams' offenses have looked so far. This is probably be a very defensive game. Like probably team to get to 20 if either of them do probably wins this game. But I'd slightly favor Colorado. It's at Houston, but Houston's not a very difficult place to play. I like the Buffaloes by probably a field goal in this game.
Yeah, I don't love Houston. This game being at Houston's good. I think if Connor Wegman plays his best football, it'll be really close. But they looked okay against Rice last week. You're supposed to beat food when you play them. That's just the expectation in college football.
Yeah,
But
you need to tell Walker Howard that.
yeah, I don't think he really got the memo on that. Sad to see that. He's a transfer from Ole Miss and LSU who didn't really pan out. Sucks to see when those 5-star guys don't really hit their potential, but yeah, Louisiana Lafayette, I think, has already moved on from him. They lost to Rice in week one. Not a good look for Louisiana Lafayette. But I think Colorado has a real chance at winning this game. I like their offense more. I think the run game's better. Houston just looks kind of stale. Like last year, their biggest problem was how bad they were on offense. Their defense always gives people trouble schematically, but I just don't like how unversatile this offense is. They're not really explosive. They don't really have any guys that stand out to me on film that are real guys you got to key in on and game plan for. Every team's got their trouble players that present more of a threat than the rest of the roster, but I don't think this Houston team has any guys that I'm really scared to go up against if I'm Colorado. So I would probably take Colorado by -5.5 plus. I think that would be pretty easy there on Colorado, maybe a touchdown. Should be fun though. Big 12 conference play starts for them, so good start to the season, decent slate. Moving on to a game that I'm pumped about: Clemson at Georgia Tech. So I think I picked Clemson to win this game in the beginning of the season, but I had Georgia Tech going and playing Clemson in the ACC championship game. Maybe it was Miami. I don't know. I know I had them going to the ACC championship game despite losing this one. I think they're going to pull this one out. After seeing Clemson start the season and Georgia Tech's, they didn't even have Haynes King last week, and they put up great offensive numbers. I know it wasn't against a good team, but Georgia Tech just is so efficient running the ball. I think if Haynes King gets going and is healthy, that's the key factor. If he's healthy, I think they should win this game. They got it at home. Clemson has not looked good offensively. Defensively, they've been all right, but Georgia Tech's gonna be able to run the ball on just about anybody they want. They did it on Georgia last year at will. I think they do it to Clemson, and I think they come out with a win here.
I'd have to agree. I'm not as confident as I was though. There's a lot of people jumping on this, so that kind of always scares me away. But I do think Georgia Tech like genuinely might just be the better team in this game, and it's at home.
Yeah, I think that's what the narrative is kind of flipping to right now. In the beginning of the season, Georgia Tech was the dark horse team. Clemson was the obvious favorite, at least is what it looked like. So nobody wanted to pick this game, but some people were. I wasn't sure about it. I'm a big Georgia Tech hype rider right now. Like I've been on that train since the beginning of the season, and I still didn't pick that game. But now I'm definitely wishing I had. I'm still as far as the overview for this week, I'm going to take Georgia Tech. But as far as my predictions go, I did not pick them to win this game from the preseason. And that just proves why preseason predictions really don't matter that much because so much can change in just 2 weeks. But should be a really fun game. I'd be surprised if Georgia Tech put a splattering on Clemson in this game offensively. I think they really could run it up on Clemson. It would be really interesting to see what happened to Dabo if that did occur. I don't know that we'll see that, but that's a possibility. I think it'll be relatively close, and I think Haynes King's going to get a huge statement win here. The next game, I think this is probably College Game Day, Georgia at Tennessee. I think that was announced recently. That was College Game Day's next location. Should be a very telling game for both of these teams. Tennessee has a lot of hype coming into this game offensively. Defensively, not so much, but I think this offense has risen above expectations already in the first 2 weeks. So much so that there was an AP poll voter that moved up Tennessee like 9 spots after their win this weekend against East Tennessee.
I think it was more than that.
It was Eastern Kentucky, maybe. I can't remember. It was a garbage team they played. And they moved them up so many spots after that win. And the only reason I'm bringing this up right now is so we can have a quick conversation about what's going on. There's been a huge kind of rush in the media about the AP poll. I'm surprised it's taking them this long, just generally in the media, to expose the AP poll voters for being non-college football watchers and consumers. After seeing these people try to explain their rankings, I just don't see how you can justify these people having votes. Specifically, the people that got exposed, I don't think you just take their votes away. I think you got to do a whole deep dive, clean out of these people who we don't even know who they are voting on this poll. If this poll is going to get the screen time and television time that it's getting and the credibility that it's getting, it's affecting locker rooms in college football. I know people think that it's not that big of a deal. I heard one AP poll voter say it really doesn't matter. It matters. It's not just a number on a screen. These teams, these players, these coaches are affected by these numbers. Even though they really shouldn't be, they're always going to be. When a team gets ranked for the first time in 3 years, that's a huge deal for them. But we have total clowns who don't understand college football casting ballots, and some of these teams aren't getting their chance to be ranked. Like Mississippi State just had a huge statement win. They're not going to get ranked. Vanderbilt, I don't even know if they're ranked right now, but even if they were, they're probably going to get ranked at like 25 or 24. I have them there right now. I have a feeling after this week, despite a loss or winning at South Carolina, I'll have them moving up. I think they look too good to stay farther down where they're at. But I just don't like what I'm seeing from the AP poll. And social media has been having a day with these AP poll voters explaining their reasoning, especially with Florida. I think one person had Florida moving up after their loss against USF and USF staying unranked. Thought that was really funny.
Yeah, that's the most egregious thing that I've seen. That's what everybody's been talking about the most is that.
Yeah, I think it's the logic and the thought process to me and just knowing they don't watch the football games. That's the hardest part for me. It's not necessarily that they're not around football and they don't get
A
football.
lot of them are beat writers for one team, so they just spend all their time covering one specific team, and then get asked to make a poll for the top 25. Like, you can't ask people doing that job to do that. It needs to be people that cover the whole sport, not just one team.
Exactly. And I think that's a hard balance to find. I think there's only a few people in the media industry that have credibility that watch this much football. And I think the way the AP poll is structured is to have a lot of different people voting with a lot of different ballots, which creates a more accurate poll in their eyes. Um, I think there's some unnamed people that should have a vote right now that don't. I don't know what changes in that area over time. I don't think this changes anything. I feel like the NCAA and the AP poll are two things that just will probably always stick around and be an issue and just be not well organized, not well understood by the general media and the public. And we'll just continue to have conversations like this. But I just wanted to bring some clarity to that and point that out. The AP poll is garbage. If you want to see real college football rankings, go look at pretty much any other college football podcast where the people running the podcast actually watch football games. And I would include us in those podcasts that you should be looking at the rankings on. I feel like because of our feel for the game, we have pretty solid rankings. Now, you could probably pick some things out of my rankings, like Vanderbilt being too low or USF being a little too high. But I'm just giving credit to teams with very good wins that have proven that they can play good football. And I know Landon's doing the same thing week in and week out. So maybe there is a lot of shifting in the polls that we create, but we're just going to give credit to the teams that play the best football in the games that we've watched.
That's the best way to do it early in the season because, I mean, these teams are starting to build resumes, and you have to reward the ones that have the best ones right now.
Yeah, if you're going to do a ranking, I heard a wise man say this one time. If it's a ranking, you reward the teams off of merit and off of production on the field and results. If you're going to do a power ranking, I think that neutral site favorability is a pretty good way to go. I always think that way when I'm ranking teams, even if I try to reward teams, it's kind of a mix if I'm just doing a ranking like top 25 poll. But I'm always thinking about who would beat who neutral site. That's just how my brain works. If I see Arkansas playing Ole Miss, whether I'm trying to decide whether I want to rank them higher or lower, I'm just going to put them head to head on neutral site in Dallas and be like, all right, who's going to win and by how much? And that's going to tell me where I need to rank those two teams as opposed to the other teams around them. And you can do that from top to bottom with 5 teams, 20 teams, 30, 40 teams. You can do it for all 136 teams. It would just take you a really long time. And that's why people have computer models now. We'll probably end up coming out with a good one that we really like and we trust at some point soon. But that's just a real issue right now with college football media is how they rank teams and what these top 25s are looking like. I think they do have an influence. I don't care what anybody says. These rankings matter, especially when we get down to the college football playoff rankings. A lot of these people voting for the college football playoff rankings, I feel like don't watch a lot of football either. So when we get to that part of the season, we'll talk about that more. But we got to get through these big game overviews that we've got lined up. The next game I have is Pitt at West Virginia. And I don't feel good about this game for West Virginia. It's a rivalry game. That's why we have it on here. So anything could happen. But don't like what I saw from West Virginia last week after we picked them to lose to Ohio. Parker Navarro ran all over them. They played a great game. Pitt's got a really good offense. I think that they're going to take advantage of a poor West Virginia defense, and losing their running back, Jaheim White, is going to be a big hit for them. So I have Pitt winning this game pretty handily, but there's always a scenario where the home team, West Virginia, in a rivalry pulls out a crazy upset.
This
So
game's been pretty close the past couple of years, so I have a hard time not seeing it be that way. These teams hate each other so much, but I don't see a world in which West Virginia pulls it out. Really, they're just so bad right now.
yeah,
The way they played last week on offense was just atrocious. They didn't look great in week one either. Pitt hasn't looked amazing. Like they really haven't done anything great. They played close with Central Michigan for a while, but I still think they are far better. A lot more talent, much better at the quarterback position, in my opinion. So I think they win this game. Probably about 2 touchdowns. Maybe it's close going into the fourth quarter, but I think Pitt's just too good.
yeah, I think that it's going to take a while for having a new coach and a new offensive system to really instill that in this team. It's just too early that with the talent disparities of these teams to have West Virginia winning a lot of games this year. I think it's going to take time. I trust the coaching on this squad, and I feel like they'll get better throughout the years. But you just got to instill a process with your team, and West Virginia just hasn't gotten to do that yet. So I think Pitt's going to win this game. Moving on, USF at Miami. I'm going to leave this game with not much to be said because I don't know what's going to happen. I think the line right now is minus 17 towards Miami. I don't hate that, but I probably would lean a little bit lower, closer to UCF.
You mean
I
USF?
Oh my gosh, yeah,
Yeah.
closer to USF. I like Byron Brown a lot, and he proved to me last week that he can beat big teams. And their defense is good enough to compete with just about anybody. We'll see this weekend against Miami if they really can. Miami's got a very efficient offense that will take those dink and dunk plays and will take the easy yards. Florida, I felt like was just playing hero ball in that game against USF last week and just couldn't come up with anything. So we'll see how an experienced Carson Beck led Miami squad plays, but I'm probably going to take Miami. I definitely see a scenario where USF wins this game, but following up two really good performances with a away win at a top five Miami team, if USF pulls this game off, they may be a top 10, top five team. Like
I'd put them in my top five if they pulled this off.
I think you have to. I mean, even if they don't finish that way, you got if it's a ranking like we were just talking about. You got to put them higher. So I like Miami. I'd probably take them by a touchdown, maybe 10, but not super confident in that game.
I think it'll be a close game. I think the line's too big again too, because last week it was 17 also. It's kind of funny to see that again. It is a better team though, Miami than Florida. I think it'll be similar, but USF's going to need more offense to beat Miami. I think Miami's offense is pretty well put together, and maybe won't have a huge day against USF's defense because I do really like USF's defense, but I like Miami by probably a touchdown. But I don't think this would be a game that you go away from thinking like USF is not as good as we thought. I think they're still going to be an impressive team after this. I don't think they get embarrassed or anything. So Miami by a touchdown.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to draw too much from a USF loss at this point. To chalk this up as they should be unranked and there's really not much to this team. They were just kind of a two-game wonder. Would be ridiculous if they were to lose a close game here, or even a 10 to 14 point game. I mean, if they if they score points and they stay in this game for the first half, I still have them ranked probably top 20 easily. They just look like a great team to me all around. So there's going to be unless USF wins this game, I wouldn't take too much out of this against USF. So we'll see what happens here. Should be a lot of fun at Miami after being at Florida. It's gonna be tough to follow up what they did last week. The next game immediately following that is going to be Florida at LSU. I think that's also a night game, so it should be around the same time. Florida's got to have a rebound. I don't feel like that they're going to be as explosive on offense as I thought they were this season, but at some point, I mean, you've got the talent necessary to do so. You got to start finding a way to score points. I know going at night against a solid LSU defense is not the best place to try to figure that out. But I think they're going to find some touchdowns in this game that are going to keep them very close in it down to the wire in the fourth quarter.
I agree. I think it'll be a very close game and surprise a lot of people, but I do like LSU to find a way.
Yeah, I think the teams that LSU's played up to this point have had very poor offensive performances, and if they had played any better, it would have been a much different outcome for LSU. Not saying Louisiana Tech had any chance to beat LSU. 23-7 was a lying score. They were clearly the more talented team. They just did not play well on offense this past weekend. But Florida's got a really solid run game with Jaden Ball, and when DJ Lagway can move and get extra yards on the ground, extend plays, they're not a fun team to play against defensively, and LSU hasn't seen that yet. Cade Klubnik did present that threat, but they bottled him up. He did not look right in that game. I think that if DJ Lagway really is healthy right now and he's playing his best football, this is a really scary game for LSU. It's a huge trap game. So I'm not entirely sure where I would put the line at this game if I was making it, but I think odds makers currently have this game at like -8.5 for LSU, something in that nature. It's probably a good line. If I was betting on it as an LSU fan, I would take that. But thankfully, I'm not an LSU fan, and there's a chance I might bet on this. We'll see. I feel like Florida's got pretty good odds right now. Florida money line might be a good play here, but anytime you bet against LSU as an Ole Miss fan, you're probably making a huge mistake. So maybe I learned my lesson this weekend. Maybe I don't. Landon, do you have any thoughts about this game as far as Florida's offense being able to actually perform as opposed to last week because they were just so abysmal?
There's no reason, like, with how they've played, why they should be better in this game against a better defense than LSU. But I just have a feeling that they're going to be able to do something. That's just a gut feeling I have, just kind of my feel for the game. I don't think it'll be anything crazy, but I think they'll find a way to be able to stay in it.
Yeah, and I mean they beat this team last year in the swamp. So I mean I know it's a completely different environment, flipping the script from having a really strong advantage in the swamp to having to go to Death Valley after a tough loss. Florida's going to be hungry for a win here. Billy Napier's got to take one back, and this would be a huge statement win for Florida, despite the loss against USF. I mean they probably are ranked again if they win this game. LSU's number 3 in the country in the AP poll. What are the AP poll voters going to do if Florida wins? They're going to lose their minds. Everybody's betting on LSU to win the Natty right now. So I think this game will probably be one that we look back on, whether LSU wins or loses, as a make or break game for either of these teams, despite the outcome. More so for Florida if they lose this game. They're going to be hard pressed to find wins down the stretch. They got to steal one early and get some momentum right now. I don't think this is going to be like last season where they can be 4-4 and start rattling off wins at the last second. There's just too much depth at the bottom of their schedule with these teams. It's going to get tougher and tougher and tougher as they go. But this game's a huge one for them. Texas A&M at Notre Dame is our next game. I don't know how I feel about this. I liked how Notre Dame played in week 1 against Miami, despite losing by 3. Nah, they still had a chance to win this game. I felt like their offense was a little slow. They should have given the ball to Jeremiah Love. He really is one of the best players in the country. He should be getting 20 touches a game. He did not in that first game. I think they've got real players at wide receiver. Great House is a great receiver, and I really like what I've seen from Malachi Fields. He didn't get the ball as much as I was hoping last game. He'll definitely play better as the season goes along. CJ Carr, if that was a average performance for him, or he can improve on that throughout the season, they're in great shape because he played really well. In a first start on the road against a top ranked team, I don't know that you can ask more from a freshman quarterback. So very impressed with how he played. I think this will be a lot of fun. Texas A&M traveling to South Bend. I mean, we haven't seen this matchup before in a while. At least as far as Texas A&M being in South Bend, I don't know that we've ever seen that matchup. Should be a lot of fun. Marcel Reed is an incredible quarterback with a lot of athleticism. Their offense looks really good. Mario Craver and Casey Concepcion have been absolutely explosive for this team. Rushing offense hasn't been necessarily a strength right now, and rushing defense definitely hasn't. They showed that against UTSA and Utah State. stopping the run is not a strength for them right now. Rushing the passer has been good for them. I think they had a streak of plays against Utah State last week where the same player had three straight sacks on Utah State's quarterback on one drive and closed out a 3-and-out with three sacks, which is crazy. I don't know if I've ever seen that. I think there's a lot of upside with A&M, but I have them going 8-4 this season again. I just feel like this is one they're supposed to lose.
Yeah, I'm going to be going with Notre Dame here too. I didn't come away from their loss against Miami thinking that they were a bad team or not, or a team that can't make the playoff. A&M, I'm not 100% sure about. I had them going 8-4 also. They haven't really done anything to show me that they can be much better than that so far this year. And it's at South Bend. I think Notre Dame gets it done and really hammers it on the ground and puts it to them in that way.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to see Marcel Reed really step up in this game if I'm gonna believe in Texas A&M. If he throws for over 300 yards in this game, I see a scenario where Notre Dame just can't keep up. They've got so much explosiveness out wide as a team that they really could just take it to Notre Dame's secondary. It looked pretty susceptible, even though that was supposed to be a strength of their team, to a Miami passing offense that was really consistent. I think that Miami is more consistent passing the ball than A&M, but Marcel Reed is really hard to defend against. If he can be accurate down the field, this will be a close game. Um, we might see more points than people are expecting this game. I think A&M is going to have to come out firing if they want to win. If they try to run the ball a bunch in this game and chew clock, I think Notre Dame probably comes out on top. But I don't think that's what Mike Elko is going to do. I think they come out and they try to throw the football a lot on this team. They've got so much speed; it's just hard not to utilize that there. I'll take Notre Dame. Close game, should be a lot of fun. I expect them to win here though. Our next game is Vanderbilt at South Carolina. I think that after watching South Carolina play against Virginia Tech and seeing how they played last week, I'm not as high on them as I thought I would be at this point. They haven't looked like they've strung together 4 quarters of actual offense yet. I mean, they've been so inconsistent. I just don't know what I'm going to get. I've seen their big playability. Special teams looks great and defense looks great. But can they score consistently and move the chains and get first downs against quality defenses? I mean, they went 3-and-out so many times against a pretty average Virginia Tech defense that I just don't know what's supposed to make me think they could do that against Vanderbilt. I mean, they played poorly against South Carolina State last week, even though it was a rain delay game. And I mean, to be fair, I think they're probably trying to keep Lenore Sellers from overextending himself and trying to keep him healthy. But they should have easily put away that football team.
Yeah, there's no excuse for their performance in that game. They only scored 17 points on offense. Two of their touchdowns were punt return touchdowns. One was a defensive touchdown, but 17 points on offense against a bad FCS team. There's just no excuse.
Yeah, and it's easy to overreact to these games like we've been talking about. Like Georgia only beat Austin P by what, 22 this past week. I mean, everything in me wants to look at those two games that we were just talking about and be like, oh, these teams are overrated. But they played great defensively and they played great on special teams. That's 2/3 of the battle right there. Now you just got to go convert on third downs and score touchdowns against good teams, and you're a top 10 team. Teams that are good in all phases are top 10 teams. Rarely do we see teams that are elite in all three phases. I remember Alabama teams being elite in all three phases, and those teams were unstoppable. Same with Clemson. They had years like that as well. That LSU team in 2019 might be the best team we've seen. And I don't even know necessarily they were elite on defense, but as far as offense and special teams goes, they were up there. But yeah, I think that this game will be really interesting. How Vanderbilt's able to run the ball will dictate this game. If they can get the option scheme working and they get yards on first down, it'll be a long day for South Carolina. If South Carolina lives in the backfield with Dylan Stewart and they can get pressure on Diego Pavia and they can throw the ball, Vanderbilt might be in trouble. I think South Carolina's defense against the run is going to be the storyline in this game. If they stop the run, they're going to win. If they don't, it'll probably be really close towards the end of the game. That's what I would probably have it at. So I'll probably take South Carolina by a field goal. Not extremely confident about that, but should be a fun game. Start conference playing the SEC. Next, we got Duke at Tulane. So we considered going to this game. We went to Tulane, Kansas State last year. It was a lot of fun. Kansas State barely beat Tulane, as we talked about already on the podcast. Very interesting game. They play Duke this year at home. Darian Mensah comes back on a new team after getting paid a bag to come play at Tulane. That's why we wanted to go to this game. If Duke had beaten Illinois, there's a real chance this game would have been a high profile game for this week. But after watching the way Duke played, I'm just not confident they're going to get it done here. I didn't feel like this was one of the best games this week, but it's definitely up there as a game that should be have an eye kept on, should be watched if you really care about college football. This has a lot of implications mainly for Tulane. If they can prove that after losing a star quarterback and replacing him late in the season with a transfer in the fall, that they can win a big game against a Power Four team that had 9 wins last year. This team is a playoff contender out of the Group of Five in my eyes. They've got a tough schedule. They come to Ole Miss in 2 weeks. I mean, that game's going to be tough. We'll see how they perform against Duke here, but I might take Tulane, but not by much. Less than a field goal, at least as far as confidence is concerned. I don't know. I don't see a scenario where Tulane blows Duke out of the water just because of what Duke presents offensively with Mensa and those receivers. Cooper Barkate looks really good. I just think that Jake Retzlaff and this Tulane offense will get rolling, and Duke's just not going to be able to stop them.
Yeah, I think this will be a competitive game. I don't see Duke doing what they did last week, turning the ball over 5 times, which really killed them in that game. A game that probably would have been competitive without that. But I think this will be a competitive game throughout. But I'd probably slightly favor Tulane. It being at home, big game with the storylines with Mensa coming back, and obviously them having Retzlaff could be a huge difference. I like them by probably a field goal to a touchdown.
Yeah, I think somewhere in that area is probably good for this game. I see a scenario where Duke comes in there and Mensa lights them up too, but Tulane will keep it close either way, whether it's a shootout or whether they win by a considerable margin, which I don't think they'll win in a blowout. But I like a high scoring game here. Should be fun. Looking forward to seeing that matchup. Should be a cool storyline. All right, and moving on to the preview for our game that we're going to be visiting this weekend. Ole Miss versus Arkansas. This is my first game attending for Ole Miss this year. I'm excited to see the Rebels live, and I hope that our offense shows up for this game. I think that we're going to need to play probably our best performance so far this season, even though we've only played 2 games against some subpar competition. Arkansas's offense has looked really good. I think in order to keep up, we're going to have to score at least 30 points in this game. Defensively, I think we're going to be okay. We may have trouble stopping this dual threat quarterback, Taylor Green, that Arkansas brings to the table. He's an incredible player. When he's consistent, he keeps the ball, he can be a real weapon. So I think this will be a high scoring, close game. Look at Ole Miss's defense to probably have a couple key turnovers or big sacks on third down to maybe steal a touchdown lead against Arkansas at some point late in the third or fourth quarter. It probably gives them the edge here, but I fully expect this game to be one of the better games of the week. After last season, I don't see Ole Miss beating Arkansas again, 63-30, or whatever the score was. I don't think there's that much volatility in these two teams. I think Arkansas might be better than people think. I wasn't very high on this team. I think I had them going 4-8 at the beginning of the season. They look better than a 4-8 team to me. Their schedule's rough, but win here would be huge for Arkansas. I think with Sam Pittman being on the hot seat right now, him winning a game right here would be a huge breath of fresh air for him. I mean, he's got to have an upset win at some point soon because they're not going to be favored in many of these games moving forward.
I think one of the main keys of this game is Austin Simmons not turning the ball over early because that's what he's done the past 2 weeks. Able to get away with it, obviously, against Georgia State. But that helped Kentucky keep that game close. If he does that again this week, they could be in trouble against an Arkansas team that I think is much better than Kentucky and Georgia State. So if he's able to avoid that, I'm pretty confident in Ole Miss winning. But if he can't, then watch out for Arkansas here.
Yeah, I was telling you earlier, Landon, if I was an Arkansas fan, I would absolutely be hitting the money line on this. I think Ole Miss is favored by 9.5. Might be able to get 8.5 on like ESPN or something, but they are favored by probably more than I would favor them at as an Ole Miss fan with a little bit of bias factored in. We did historically lose games to Arkansas when we were supposed to beat them. I think a lot of Ole Miss fans are sleeping on this game. We could win by several touchdowns and be the better team with more depth. There's a scenario for that, but I think this will probably be a shootout. I think the matchup is what is the most interesting to me. You've got an inexperienced quarterback in Austin Simmons who has a lot of talent, a lot of upside, but very turnover prone. Looks very flustered right now and is not settled in with a poor offensive line. Is just not really been playing really good in pass protection. They've been over reliant on slide protection and just we just can't seem to get enough time for Austin Simmons to really look downfield and complete those second and third reads. And even when he does have time, he holds onto the ball too long. It's just going to take time. It took time with Jackson Dart. It took time with Matt Corral in the Lane Kiffin system to really develop into the passers that they ended up being, which were elite. Um, I think Austin Simmons has all the tangibles. He's just not ready right now to be an elite quarterback. Um, Taylor Green, being the veteran quarterback that he is, going up against an inexperienced quarterback in Austin Simmons, that's the matchup highlight that I'm looking at the most. If Taylor Green keeps the ball and doesn't turn it over in this game, Arkansas absolutely could win. He's got insane dual threat ability. He ran for 151 yards on the ground last week against Arkansas State. Threw for several hundred as well. I mean, he's just a tough guy to stop when he doesn't turn the ball over. And he can stay healthy. He didn't play much against Ole Miss last year. He got hurt, so I think we ended up playing against their backup most of the game, who transferred to Purdue. I think that's going to be the highlight to watch as far as matchups are concerned. The impact players I wanted to rattle off real quick: Xavier Sori, linebacker for Arkansas, absolute ball hawk. I mean, just keeping the ball away from him is going to be a huge priority for Lane Kiffin. Whatever side of the field he's on, probably don't want to throw into those zones. He's a ball hawk. I would try to watch out for him, especially with how turnover prone Austin Simmons has been on those intermediate throws. He hasn't turned it over down the field yet. It's been a lot of intermediate across the middle stuff. Xavier Sori is going to be there. Gotta watch out for him. And then Taylor Green, like I just said, I mean, if he plays good football, they can win the game. If he doesn't, if he plays one of those inconsistent games that we've seen from him, they're not going to win. They've got to have him play his best football. For Ole Miss, I got Harrison Wallace at wide receiver. He's currently top 10 in the nation in receiving yards, despite Ole Miss's tough start, turning the ball over offensively with interceptions. They've seen a lot of great output with the wide receiver position, and I feel like Harrison Wallace is the leader in that category for sure. He's been the obvious number one target for Austin Simmons. So look to see him make a big impact in this game, kind of similar to how Jordan Watkins did last year. Maybe not near the statistics. I don't know if anybody remembers that Jordan Watkins had like 300 receiving yards against Arkansas last year, but he went stupid against them. Multiple touchdowns down the field, very long plays from Jackson Dart to Watkins. I don't know if we'll see that level of play, but I think he'll be the guy that we target the most. And then defensively, I've got Xavier Harris, nose tackle. He's been in the thick of it for Ole Miss, getting a majority of those big pressures up the middle that have blown up huge plays. I think that if he can have a big game, he's going to be really tough for this Arkansas offensive line to stop. He outmatches everybody size wise. He moves really fast for his size. Being around 6'8", maybe to 6'7", Xavier Harris is a matchup nightmare at defensive tackle. I mean, he's just a complete unit. He's big, he's fast, he's got insane length, he's got really good pass rush moves, and he's gap sound. Good run stuffer, can still get to the quarterback. He has a good game like he's been playing. He played really well against Georgia State. He even had an interception in week one. Played really well last week. Really good at stopping the run for us against Kentucky. He's had some blocked field goals in the past couple seasons just because how tall he is. So he can make an impact just about anywhere defensively and on special teams. Those are my players to watch out for. What are you most keyed in on with this game, Landon? You think is going to have a huge impact?
Really, just kind of what I said earlier about the early turnovers from Austin Simmons. I feel like that'll determine how this game goes, kind of.
Yeah, I definitely see that being probably one of the biggest factors. If he comes out the gate and can keep the ball, just like with Taylor Green, I think the team that turns the ball over the least in this game probably will do better. That's typically how most games go, but sometimes, like last year, SMU played against what was it? Was it BYU? It was
Duke,
Duke,
and they turned it over 6 times,
and they still won.
and Duke did not turn over once, and they still won.
Yeah, Ole Miss turned the ball over two times last week against Kentucky. I don't know that Kentucky turned the ball over once, and we still won. So the better team can still win with turnovers, but if you are the better team and you keep the ball safe, you're definitely going to win. So we'll see if Ole Miss can do that. I probably have Ole Miss by in between a touchdown, a field goal, and a shootout. Should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to breaking down this game after the fact. Even if Ole Miss does lose this game, I think this is a very interesting scenario either way for whichever team wins. I think that's going to do it. That was the preview for our game that we're going to go to this weekend with Ole Miss and Arkansas. I think it'll prove to be a really fun one. And I think that'll do it for episode 8.